Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of VGC Academy, where I attempt to try and explain some of the more in-depth concepts of competitive Pokemon, in particular within the VGC formats. My name is Tyler, and I sometimes go by Atacross online, and this video is all about risk management. Okay, so why talk about this? I would argue that fundamentally Pokemon, in a competitive sense, is a numbers game, and maybe in a regular sense too, but Pokemon is a numbers game, and that is, it can be broken down into a bunch of mathematical calculations and probabilities, and it's a series of those, and those determine the overall outcome of any given game. And then with that, there's also user input required in order for these to execute. So think input, output. You have your field of Pokemon, your 2-on-2 for doing VGC battles, 2 people, 2 players. Players input their commands, and then those inputs and have values that run through a bunch of calculations, and then account for some probabilities within those calculations, and an output is produced, and that would be the turn. The way the turn plays out would be the output, and then you have a series of these all together, string together, and then you have a full game. What does this mean? Why is this thinking this way matter to playing VGC? This means that in any given game, success comes down to a player's ability to manipulate these mathematical calculations to work into their favor, while also assessing and managing probabilities that give them the highest chance of victory. I think a helpful comparison for this is the game of chess, but also it has an element of luck built into it, or chance, or whatever word you want to use. Because in chess, you have your board, each player has their pieces, and all those pieces have rules that say like they can move like this in these situations, or this amount of spaces. Those are kind of like the mathematical calculations, and you're trying to use those calculations and manipulate those to produce an outcome that works towards making it so to get to the checkmate. And the checkmate is that where their king piece, no matter what spot it moves in within those given rules for it, it will be taken by one of your pieces, and that's a checkmate, and the game's over. That's kind of what you're trying to do with Pokemon. The difference is there are factors that have probability built in, and the purpose of this video is not to break down calculations and probabilities. It's to help you understand how to manage them and manipulate those into your favor. And we're going to focus primarily on the probabilities aspect as well. Okay, so with that, let's talk about where this works out. And I've broken it down into 2 categories: risk management in team building, risk management in gameplay. We'll start with team building. You're making decisions on how much risk is involved with the moves you use. In particular, the most prominent example and straightforward example is move accuracy. You can use higher damaging moves that have lower accuracy. So for example, you have Flamethrower, 90 base power, 100 accuracy, so it won't miss as long as there's no modifiers in place. Same with Dragon Pulse, 85 power, 100 accuracy. However, you could assess, like, is the risk of missing something like Fire Blast or Draco Meteor worth it for the extra power that is gained from using those moves? And there's no right or wrong answer, but you have to decide which is more worth it: the extra power with the chance of missing, the less power with almost no chance of missing. Draco Meteor also has the special attack drop, so you have to take that into account. So in team building, you're assessing the risk and making a decision like what is worth it or more worth it. Same with some status moves. Will-O-Wisp is a really good move because it can burn Pokemon, and physical attackers have their physical moves damage reduced, cut in half. So it's an easy way to burn a Pokemon, but it comes at the cost of missing. How important is it to burning a Pokemon, and is the risk of missing worth it, rather than like maybe finding another way to deal with that Pokemon that could be like as a physical attacker that's a threat? Hypnosis. Sleep is a powerful status, so if you really want to utilize that, you could use a move like Hypnosis, which has bigger distribution than a move like Spore, but it only has 60 accuracy. So is that risk of that missing, which means it'd be a wasted turn potentially, is that worth it for the chance to put something to sleep, which could really flip the game? Same with one-hit KO moves. It's only 30% chance to hit, so when is that chance worth taking? Because again, if you miss, it's a dead turn, and would it have been better off to just do a little bit of damage rather than go for that one-hit KO move that's more likely going to miss than not? Those are considerations in team building you have to make when selecting the moves you want to run. Same with EV spreads. Do you want to calc survivability based on a modest nature or a timid nature? What's more common? Is timid more common? Great, so we'll just calc for that, with the risk of a modest Pokemon might do a one-hit KO against my Pokemon, but it's not common enough, so it's not as high of a risk. Same with speed tiers. How fast do Pokemon normally invest? Are they good examples in 2015 with Scarflandorus? Most Scarflando would be Adamant nature. So when you're trying to outspeed that, say under Tailwind or with your own Scarfer, you would just make sure you outspeed an Adamant Scarflando, taking the risk that you could come across a Jolly Scarflando, but they're not common enough and it's not too detrimental. Whereas if you absolutely 100% have to outspeed Scarflando, you're better off just calcing for Jolly Scarflando and outspeeding that, because the risk is too high to not outspeed it. So you have to take that into account, and I'll have an example on the next slide to kind of depict this a little bit. Next, team matchups. This applies more to tournament play, but you could have a team that has a particular bad matchup against a particular Pokemon, core, or archetype, but you're going into the tournament saying, I don't think I'm going to face this at all, and if I do, maybe one time. I'm willing to take that risk because I think I can beat the rest of the common meta, or the meta at the time, and do well in this tournament. So there's always that risk involved when you're going in with a known bad matchup, but you're taking that risk that, okay, there's not a lot of potential I'll face this, but then you could go in and face it a bunch of times. So there's always that consideration when it comes to matchups going into a tournament and in how you build your team. Good example right now is probably Dondozo. You can pretty easily tech enough stuff to deal with a Dondozo team so that they won't either bring it or you'll beat it pretty easily. But you're giving up it's the kind of matchup where you have to give up some other moves or maybe a Pokemon in order to cover that, whereas you could cover more matchups that you would rather kind of cover or make easier. But if Dondozo is common enough at a big tournament, it might be worth it to give that up, because you don't want to just outright lose just because you come up against a bad matchup like that, something that can get really out of hand when you play against. So those are some of those considerations, like how much of a risk am I taking by doing A versus B, X versus Y and such. So let's get to a couple examples of what I mean with especially with some of the EV spreads. But first with moves, we have a Hydreigon with a Life Orb, max special attack, going up against a Garchomp with an Assault Vest. As you can see, Dragon Pulse will not KO a 4 HP Assault Vest Garchomp. Draco Meteor will. But again, you have to decide, is the drawback of the chance of missing Draco Meteor and getting that special attack drop, is that chance worth taking in order to ensure you OHKO a 4 HP Assault Vest Garchomp? Because otherwise, you could opt for Dragon Pulse if it's not as important, but it's a tough call because Garchomp also threatens Hydreigon with Dragon moves or like Rock Slide if you Terra Fire. Yeah, so you just have to really think about those things and consider what's better. Most people opt for Draco Meteor because it's worth the risk to do that bigger damage with something like Hydreigon. But some players would say, no, I'm fine with just Dragon Pulse. I'm confident enough that Dragon Pulse will get the job done because it won't miss. So there's that. think of it this way. You have a 100%. Okay, that's not fair. You have like a 96% chance to guarantee KO Garchomp in 2 hits because, or like I should say, you only have a 4% chance to take out Garchomp in 1 hit because of the crit chance with Dragon Pulse. With Draco Meteor, you only have a 10% chance to not KO it in 1 turn. So those are the calculations you got to take into account. Another example with EV building. Say I want to have in my NDD survive a Life Orb Dark Pulse from Hydreigon. So I'm going to calc for a timid Hydreigon because most Life Orb Hydreigon are timid. So I feel good about that. I'm choosing to take the risk that I happen to come across a max special attack modest Life Orb Hydreigon, and they're going to have a 43.8% chance to 1-hit KO my Indeedee. I have to be willing to take that chance if I want to maybe invest more into the physical defense as well, but knowing that most Life Orb Hydreigon are running timid. But there might be that off chance, but I don't think it's likely, so I think the risk is worth it. So in EV building, you'll want to decide on those risks, but if I really need to make sure I always survive a Life Orb Hydreigon Dark Pulse, I could then try and survive a modest one, even though it's not very common, but I can't have that myself going down either way. So now is like I think the biggest aspect of risk management is in gameplay. So let's talk about risk versus reward. And I've kind of already alluded to this and how I've been speaking already, but anyways, here's the question I would ask when it comes to risk versus reward. Does the positive possible outcome or outcomes, i.e. the reward of any given action, in this case of any given turn, does that outweigh the negative possible outcome or outcomes, which is the risk? Does the reward outweigh the risk? Because typically if the reward outweighs the risk is worth taking. There's a few occasions where the risk is high and the reward's not super high, but you kind of have to take it. It's pretty rare, but it's there. And these assessments of risk, they range from very simple to very complex. So for example, say I have an 80% chance to hit this Hydro Pump and win the game. Simple. I have an 80% chance to win the game. Hit Hydro Pump, I win. Miss Hydro Pump, they KO me back, I lose. It can be very simple to that. But they can also get really complex to something like that involves the player making a decision that you can't even quantify. So I need my opponent to predict this Protect onto my Garchomp and its partner. And then I need to hit Rock Slide on both Pokemon and flinch the specific Pokemon, it can get crazy. Like, okay, I gotta do this, and this. And all these things have to happen. Or at least some of these things have to happen to have it. Yeah, it gets super complex. So, and I already mentioned that it's not even just the numbers thing, but there's the player involved. You have to think about what is the player gonna do and how likely is he gonna do it. You can't quantify that. And so that's why I think risk needs to be broken down into objective risk and subjective risk. These are things that I'm gonna call it. Objective risk involves clear number-based probabilities. That is like the 10% chance for Draco Meteor to miss. That's a pretty hard number. It's going to hit 90% of the time. 9 times out of 10, it's going to hit, if you want to say it. Or 90 times out of 100, it's going to hit. That's most likely what would happen if you used it 100 times and tracked it. So, and these probabilities are outside the player's and opponent's control, other than certain modifiers. So, with disregarding modifiers, it's 90% chance and nothing you can do about it, the move's going to hit 9 times out of 10. Then there's subjective risk. And this involves the choice actions of the opponent. You can't quantify this with numerical probability due to it being dependent on the choices of the subject, i.e. the opponent. Or that is the opponent. So yeah, you can't put a number to say, alright, what are the chances my opponent protects this Pokemon or doesn't protect it? That's up to the person. They're either going to or they're not. There's not a chance to. They're gonna make the decision themselves. There's nothing forced telling them they're gonna take the chance, what chance they're gonna protect. So you can't quantify it. And that's when the risk versus reward and the risk management gets really complicated, is when you're combining both the objective and subjective risk. Like, you can easily assess some of the objective risk, but then there's that subjective risk you have to account for and do the best you can, either based on like if you know how the player typically plays, how if you're paying attention to the kind of way they have them playing, or it's like, so I've heard people say like, I just had a gut feeling that they're gonna go for this, and then you just like, that's a subjective risk you're taking. So that's the thing that really complicates risk management, is that subjective risk aspect, and that's where you get into the topic of predictions, which that could be another good video for VGC Academy. Let me know what you think. So, okay, let me run through an example of like a whole two turns here in an endgame scenario where I have my Hydreigon, Terra Steeled, and my Indeedee next to it, and then they have Oranguru, who happened to Dark Terra type, which makes this scenario work better. So they Dark Terra for whatever reason, whatever. And then they have Torkoal. These are the last two Pokemon. The other two Pokemon have already been knocked out on both sides, and this is it. The Trick Room just expired, and now for them to win, they have to get up Trick Room. Like, that is their out to winning, because otherwise Hydreigon just kills Torkoal, and now they have no offensive output. Because Torkoal is just a Heat Wave away from knocking out both my Pokemon, but it's not moving faster right now, or before Hydreigon, which can knock out Torkoal with maybe, let's say, a Dark Pulse at this point. So here's where the subjective risk comes in. Well, first, here's some of the objective stuff. Dark Pulse, 20% chance to flinch, 0% if Oranguru is in our focus, and we haven't confirmed if it is. Draco Meteor has a 4.17 roughly % chance to crit and a 10% chance to miss, and those are relevant because I have to stop Trick Room if I want to win this game. Them getting Trick Room up basically wins the game. I need to stop Trick Room. So here's two objective things that could stop Trick Room. Flinch Oranguru if it's on inner focus, crit Draco Meteor. Pretty small chance at that, especially considering most Oranguru on Trick Room teams are running inner focus. And I don't even know if this Oranguru has Protect. So what if I attack into Protect Oranguru and Torkoal just attacks? Like, I don't know that. I have to take that into account. And would my opponent think that? So, like, already you're seeing how complicated it's getting. But here's another facet. Like, on my opponent's side, they don't know if Indeedee has Trick Room. And the most obvious play for them right now is to protect Torkoal and go for Trick Room, knowing that they can't knock out Oranguru unless it was, like, crit a Draco Meteor. But they have to run that risk that maybe they just... they have to run the risk of attacking with Torkoal and then me not attacking Torkoal. So yeah, it gets super complicated. So anyways, so let's run it down how I would play this turn out based on those scenarios. I would 100% attack Torkoal, even though I think it's going to protect, because the reality is if that thing gets an attack off, I lose, and I can't risk that. I also have to stop Trick Room. However, because I have Trick Room on Indeedee, and I haven't revealed that, and my opponent doesn't know that, because we're playing in a scenario on ladder that doesn't have open team cheats. In a tournament, that would be different. That aside, they don't know that, so I'm going to bank on that, and I'm going to just expect them to take the obvious play of protect Trick Room, knowing that, like, that's just what they want to do. So I will attack the Torkoal to cover them, potentially not protecting it, and then go for Trick Room, expecting them to Trick Room. So Trick Room goes twice in the same turn, which then just is null. It nulls things. So we're gonna do that. There's always the chance my opponent just makes the call that, like, Indeedee has Trick Room, they're gonna go for Trick Room. I'm not gonna Trick Room, so they set up Trick Room for. So like I set up Trick Room for them. I'm taking that risk, but I think it's a small risk. I'm assessing that as a small risk based on the information that my opponent has on my Indeedee, because they have to take the risk of, like, me not having Trick Room or something, or the risk of me actually having Trick Room. And what if they don't? They assume I'm gonna go for Trick Room, and then they don't Trick Room, and yeah. So that's what we're going to do. So, in DD Trick Rooms, Torkoal protects, Oranguru goes for Trick Room. Null, it's a null turn, basically. Except that now, going to the next turn, Torkoal, if it wants to protect now, it only has a, here's the hard number now, it only has a 1 in 3 chance to successfully get a second protect off in a row. So a roughly 33.33% chance to get another protect off. I feel good about those odds. I'm going to take those odds and I'm just going to attack it. Now, what if it does get the protect off? Oranguru goes for Trick Room, sets up Trick Room, I lose. 1 in 3 chance for me to lose in that scenario. Okay, I'm going to Trick Room with Ndidi again, just in case. But now my opponent knows I have Trick Room, and I think they might run. They have like a higher chance of not going for Trick Room, and maybe banking on them getting the protect. So they might do that, but ultimately it's resting on this objective. I think the objective risk takes priority over any subjective risk, so it's coming down to that mostly, and then it depends on what the Oranguru does. But for the sake of this scenario, protect fails, Torkoal gets knocked out, game is over. Very hypothetical situation, some similar situations to what I've been in the past, but I hope that kind of gives an idea of, one, how complicated risk management can get, but also like just how to manage it a little bit, especially like thinking about what's more likely that my opponent does, when to kind of elevate objective risk more than subjective risk. So like in this final case, I'm gonna prioritize the objective risk of protect happening, take that chance. I'm gonna try and cover if protect goes off with Trick Rooming and DD and hoping they Trick Room with in Oranguru, but I'll take the protect chance mostly. So I hope that helps. Anyways, guys, we're at 22 minutes. I hope you have enjoyed and found this helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can see when I put out more videos like this, and feel free to suggest any other guides, or if you'd like me to go even like into a very specific thing on this topic, because I'm only scratching the surface. We can get really deep in stuff with a lot of example, or just get more examples going in a particular facet. So but yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed and have a great rest of your day, and see you in the next video. See ya.